listening to the Baumbastic Podcast with Andrew Ellis on Inside Arkansas.
What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to the Baumbastic Podcast, the best damn baseball show on the planet, presented by Inside Arkansas, hosted by Andrew Ellis, and brought to you by the #1 sports betting app in the state of Arkansas, SARACEN. We got a brilliant live stream edition of the show today, our little spin-off show called Calling All Casuals, where I invite casuals and diehards alike to come together and join in fellowship over Razorback baseball. I'm hoping throughout the season this will kind of form into a place where the casuals will come and just kind of get caught up to speed of, hey, I wasn't able to watch last weekend. I've been locked in on basketball. What's been going on? That is all good. Get your comments and questions in. I've already seen some good comments in the chat that will, spark some conversation. Will be very good to bounce off of you guys, and appreciate everybody for being here today. I know it's in the middle of a work day as always, but we're going to continue to do these midweek live streams throughout the entirety of baseball season. And obviously once basketball gets wrapped up, I think the fun and excitement will be there a little bit more. But thankfully, we now have some real games to talk about. 4 games have been completed for the Arkansas Razorbacks. They are 3-1. And I got to be honest, I think it went about according to schedule. Obviously, we would have liked for them to maybe hit a little bit better and would have liked for them to not give up 4 runs in the 9th inning on Sunday. But for the most part, I think if I had told you guys last week that Arkansas was going to go 3-1 and that, the one loss would be a 5-4 loss to TCU, you probably would have signed up for that. I probably would have signed up for that. That is what I predicted them to do going into the season, our season predictions. And so from that standpoint, I felt like it was kind of a ho-hum weekend, and Arkansas didn't play out of their minds great, but they also didn't play poorly. There were a lot of good things they did. Of course, some things that they're going to need to work on, most specifically hitting with runners in scoring position, squeezing all the life out of this offense, and taking advantage of those scoring opportunities, and really just getting everybody in this lineup 1 through 9 going. There were some good performances from the lineup, some that weren't great, and some guys that are going to need to have to step up. But overall, I look forward to talking it all out with you guys. And I got to say, I feel a lot better. So, obviously, how guys know how I am. I like to kind of argue all the time. I'm always in these debates about, how people should feel about wins and losses in Razorback sports. I did a little bit of a poll just because I wanted to get a feel for the fan base, because sometimes I feel like the negative voices, the detractors, are so loud that it kind of skews our view, where I'm like, dang, I think people are like really upset, really pissed, and like really concerned about the offense. And of course, we'll get into Dave Van Horn's comments, because of course he shared some concern as well. But last night I was kind of like, dude, it's kind of crazy to me how many people are like viciously angry over this. Like, is that really like how everyone feels, or is that where we're at now? And so I just posed the question on Twitter. I said, which best describes the way you feel about the Arkansas Razorbacks lineup through 4 games? The 4 options were no concern at all, they're great, mildly disappointed, big picture concern, and then completely panicked with no hope. Those were the 4 options, kind of the varying little levels there. And 51%, the big majority, said mildly disappointed. And then 25% was second, and that was no concern, they're great. So over 75%, and this is about 500 votes. This isn't the entire fan base, but, my Twitter following, which is mostly baseball fans, I would imagine, 75% say they're either only mildly concerned or not concerned at all. And some people even commented to clarify that they mean they're not concerned just because it's too early and they're not going to be concerned about anything this early. Now, 20% of you did say big picture concern, and then 4%, of course, said panicked with no hope. So roughly a quarter of the fan base is pretty concerned, like overly concerned. And then about half the fan base is mildly concerned, which honestly, like if I were to vote on my own poll, I would probably go with the mildly concerned, mildly disappointed part. And for me, it's not even as much about what Arkansas did in Arlington. It's kind of the combination of what had been happening in these scrimmages leading up to the season. And we had heard a lot about the pitching staff and heard, hey, they're kind of really starting to take over in these scrimmages. And even a few coaches on staff straight up said a few weeks ago, yeah, the lineup's been just okay. The bats have been just okay. The pitching has been really good. That's kind of what we saw in Arlington, if I'm being honest with you. The bats were just okay, and the pitching was really good. And so from that standpoint, I guess we shouldn't be super surprised. But I think that's what kind of has my concern level a little bit higher for the bats than it maybe would have been if I didn't know anything. If the scrimmages hadn't happened and it was just simply this weekend, and you look at the numbers and you say, okay, this guy will hit better, this guy will hit better, this guy will probably come down to earth. Overall, they'll probably be fine. The fact that this had been happening behind closed doors is kind of what concerns me a little bit. But before we get into your chats, and because I do want to hear from you guys and how you feel, and I'm sure some of you guys are going to, make some interesting points and all that, and we'll talk about that. Before we get into that, I do want to just run through a few of these quotes from Dave Van Horn about what he had to say following yesterday's game against Tarleton, where they scored 3 runs on, I believe, 8 hits, and really didn't do anything much outside of that first inning in terms of scoring. Obviously, they didn't do anything. A few direct quotes from Dave Van Horn, which I think kind of tell the story of how he feels and his frustrations coming out of the weekend. Quote, "A lot of the problem is going out of the zone, especially low. Arkansas struck out 46 times this week, and we kind of know, and we've talked about it a lot, that Arkansas is a team, especially with some of the skill sets, that are going to be a little bit boom or bust. They are going to strike out. Even some of the best players on this Razorback roster, Ryder Helfrich, Cam Kozel, Kahio Aloy, these are guys that really don't mind striking out. Reese Robinette, Nolan Souza, like your 5 returning position players, all 5 of them are above average strikeout rate guys. Now, almost all of them do above average damage as well, specifically Helfrich and Aloy and Kozel. But even those guys strike out a good bit. So, again, it's not necessarily stunning that Arkansas struck out a decent amount, especially because they faced some pretty good arms over the weekend. But the thing that drove Dave Van Horn nuts and kind of drove, I think, a lot of us nuts is it's one thing to just face really good stuff and you maybe swing and miss on a pitch and, the guy just beats you. He paints a 98-mile-an-hour fastball at the top of the zone. You had a tough time catching up. Okay, those strikeouts are fine. When you're swinging and missing at breaking balls in the dirt and you're swinging at pitches that are in the other's batter's box, which is what Micah New did a couple times this weekend, that's a little bit more cause for concern. And for Nolan Souza specifically, because I think he's a guy that I'm not saying Dave was straight up calling out Nolan Souza and directly pointing out him, but I think he kind of fit the criteria of some of what Dave was talking about last year when Nolan Souza, we watched him struggle really badly to start the season. And then he started to get it going a little bit, and you started to see, oh, dang, this guy's got some power, some opposite field swing. And, he gets on base, he steals a base, and, man, this guy's really dangerous. Like, what was the difference? He stopped swinging at pitches out of the zone. Nolan Souza is also a guy with a very high walk rate most times. He did not walk once this weekend, which, again, was not happening in scrimmages behind closed doors, but also even in his struggles last year wasn't happening. So I think that tells you a little bit about kind of where his head's at and what they're seeing from him. And I think Dave even said it like, we're going to have some of these dudes step up and buy in a little bit. A few more quotes from DVH. He says, "You shouldn't be hooking balls foul in an 0-2 count. You should be hitting them the other way foul." This quote I love, and I want to harp on this for just a second. That may sound a little bit weird to you of like, what's the difference between, if I'm a left-handed hitter, who cares if the foul ball goes down the right field line or the left field line? In an 0-2 count, typically, or just any 2-strike count, we always talk about approach and different things. A lot of times what you were coached and what you were taught from a young age to even now the collegiate level, let the ball travel, let it get deep, and work the other way. So if you're a left-handed hitter and you're in a 2-strike count, you should probably, if you're making contact, it should probably be going to left field because that means you're waiting, letting the ball get deep. And then if it's a strike, you're just trying to foul it off. And a lot of times you'll see these foul offs just by the skin of their teeth, and they're just kind of going the opposite way. In fact, back in high school, and I sucked as a hitter, so don't take my word for it. But when I was in high school, we used to do this drill called Yankee drill. I don't know why it was called Yankee drill, but we would literally, our goal was to hit the ball directly forward. You're at the plate, the pitcher's coming from down there, and your goal is to hit the ball directly forward. You're going to let the ball travel, get deep, and hit it forward to kind of emphasize, hey, letting it travel, kind of working the other way. That's kind of what you do in 2-strike counts. I'll give you a prime example of this. Ryder Helfrich comes up to bat in the bottom of the 11th inning of that Sunday game, and I believe it was Damian Ruiz started off with a base hit up the middle. Really good piece of hitting by him. That might have been in a 2-strike count. But Ryder immediately goes down 0-2. And I think he took a ball or two to get back into the count a little bit, but it was 1-2, 2-2. He gets a fastball on the outer third, and he's a right-handed hitter, outer third of the plate, and he just hits it where it is pitched, hits it, a line drive over the second baseman's head. Perfect textbook example of a veteran hitter shortening up with 2 strikes, kind of understanding, hey, I'm not going to hit a 2-run home run. We're in an 0-2 count, 1-2 count. That's not where my head's at. I'm no longer trying to hit a home run. I'm no longer trying to pull the ball. I'm going to be disciplined right here. I'm going to go the other way. Perfect job of that. Like perfect textbook example of that. And again, Ryder's a guy that He had his fair share of strikeouts this weekend. He's going to have his fair share of strikeouts throughout the year. But you like to see examples of that just kind of show you it's in there, that this team can do that. That also, by the way, was in a clutch situation, puts runners on first and third. A pitch later, Arkansas ends the game. Thought that was a really good example of that. And so that's what Dave's talking about. If we're in an 0-2 count, you should not be hitting it. You should not be pulling a ball foul. That tells me that you are all out of whack. That tells me your priorities are all wrong at the plate, and that you're maybe a little antsy in the box. Let that ball travel. Let it get deep. See if you can go the other way with it. This is stuff you hear growing up. And so there were some of the things that Dave was not happy with, and this is the most damning quote. Quote, "We're going to have some guys buy in, or they can just come hang out with me for a while," meaning they are going to be sitting directly next to Dave on the bench. Love this quote from Dave. And yeah, I think that's a pretty strong message to send to your team. We're going to get into some other things. I want to brush through a few quick little topics before I get into your chats. And then once we get into the chats, it's just as long as you guys want to go, we'll roll this thing out and we will chat and hang out, do whatever we got to do. But I want to talk to you about some insurance. One thing that really sets OZK Insurance apart is they're an independent insurance agency. That means they're not just tied to one company. They shop a multitude of A-rated carriers to find the best coverage and price for you. And now they've paired with something you don't usually see from an independent agency, a full-service mobile app. With the OZK Insurance app, you can see all your policies under one roof. You can pay your bills, request roadside assistance, file claims, request policy changes, or even get new quotes all from your phone. So you get the flexibility of an independent agent, but the convenience of modern technology. If you're tired of being stuck with one carrier or chasing down paperwork, go to ozkinsurance.com or search OZK Insurance in the App Store or Google Play. Local agency, national level options, one powerful app. That is what you get with OZK Insurance. We appreciate them. A few quick things that I want to touch on real quick. And then I swear I'm getting into your chats, and then we are just going to hash this thing out and chat for as long as you guys want. Circle of Trust. You guys remember, those that have listened to the program know that I did a lot of talk last year about Circle of Trust and sort of, when I would assign roles for the Razorback pitching staff, we would kind of have these guys. If you're in the Circle of Trust, that means if you're on the mound, we feel good as the fan base, as the audience, as the team, whatever. And it was pretty liberal, because I would have 2 or 3 lefties, 2 or 3 righties, maybe maybe 2 or 3 closers, maybe 2 or 3 setup options. And of course, you had your entire weekend rotation in there. And so usually the Circle of Trust featured about 12 guys, roughly, which by the end of the year is a good number that you would like to have. This year, we're going to be a little bit more strict about it. You are not getting in the Circle of Trust unless you are like a bona fide, no question about it, no real debate to be had about whether or not you are in the Circle of Trust. So it's going to be a very small list. And so I just want to quickly run through this real quick. And then as the year goes on, we'll, petition to, you guys can make your petitions to add guys. Maybe we'll add them. Maybe we're going to have to wait and see on some of these guys, but we're going to make guys really earn it. So right now I only have 3 Razorback relievers in the Circle of Trust. Now I'm not really including the 3 starting pitchers, Gackle, Dietz, Fisher. Peyton Lee is not in the Circle of Trust yet. He's, going to be Arkansas's midweek starter, it appears. Looks like a stud, on track to be a nice little piece for Arkansas. He and the other freshmen are going to have to really show us stuff in big situations before I make that proclamation and put them in the Circle of Trust. Same goes for Mark Brissy, who got his first career save yesterday. Looked awesome. Mark Brissy, frankly, could not have thrown better, but still, it takes more than just good outings to get in the Circle of Trust. You've got to do it on the weekends. You've got to do it against high-level competition. We have to have no shadow of a doubt that you are a Circle of Trust guy. And it's not just as simple as, do I trust you? Because do I trust Mark Brissy? Hell yeah, I do. Do I trust Jackson Kersher? Hell yeah, I do. There's a lot of guys that I trust that are not in the Circle of Trust just yet. Circle of Trust is definitive, and there's no way around it. So, to start off, we have a young man by the name of Cole Gibler, left-handed pitcher, sophomore from Missouri. You guys know him. Do I have any objections? Anybody want to push back against Cole Gibler being in the Circle of Trust? Do so now or forever hold your peace. I think he's a bona fide option here. Went 3 2/3 the other day, struck out 6, did not allow a hit, pitched in a ton of big situations for Arkansas last year. I don't have to wonder what Cole Gibler looks like on the mound in Omaha. I've already seen Cole Gibler on the mound in Omaha. I don't need to wonder what Cole Gibler looks like in a super regional. I've seen him pitch in a high leverage spot in a super regional. I don't have to wonder what he looks like on the weekend in the SEC. I've already seen that. I don't really see any case against him. I don't think you guys have a case against him. We will move on to the next one, who is Parker Coyle, who, frankly, of these three options, I think you could maybe make the case against him and say, well, he was great last year, but, the first 2 years of his career didn't really pitch in a ton of high leverage situations, didn't really go well for him. And then last year he was great, but he was banged up a lot and, got banged up down the stretch. And then this offseason has been kind of just okay. Like, are we sure he's a circle of trust guy? I'm going for circle of trust because I don't see any path. And by the way, he did give up one run in his one inning of work the other day. Parker Coyle, I think, is a circle of trust guy. One, because he's the oldest guy in the staff, a senior, left-handed pitcher. We have no questions about whether or not he can fill up the strike zone. We're not worried about walks or anything like that. He's another guy. I don't have to wonder what he looks like in an SEC game on the weekend. I don't have to wonder what he looks like in the NCAA tournament or any of that. We've seen Parker Coyle come in and get the job done. So he, for me, is a bona fide circle of trust guy. One of the three options. The other third guy here is a guy who I would say earned his spot this weekend, and that would be Mr. Tate McGuire, who last year was a fringe circle of trust guy. Maybe was in there for a week or two, but was not kind of a consistent. He didn't have a consistent high-level role for Arkansas, especially on the weekends coming out of the bullpen. Did some nice work coming in midweek games, but was not a circle of trust guy last year for the most part. So going into this year, his spot as a circle of trust guy was very much up for debate. Now he had a great summer in the Cape, was really good in the fall, and coming out of the fall, that's when I really started to think, okay, this might be one here. And now I think after 1 week, we can tell his role is going to be a lot bigger for this team. He has gotten better. The strike throwing has always been there. The stuff is always solid enough. We know that. The maturity is now there as well. I feel like Tate McGuire is taking the similar kind of leap that Parker Coyle took last summer, going from his sophomore year to his junior year, where now you're seeing Tate McGuire, the stuff's there, the strike throwing ability's there. Now he's ready to go out there. He's sick of being left out of these discussions. He's sick of not having his role locked down on the weekend. And in fact, he may be even biting off more than we expected him to chew. He may be working his way into that weekend rotation. We'll see, and I'm sure we'll have that conversation. I'm sure at least one of you are going to be asking questions about that. But Tate McGuire is who I have as the third circle of trust guy. That's it. Other than the three starters on the weekend, which, again, they're kind of separate here. We're really talking about bullpen guys that you would turn to. But on the watch list for circle of trust, Steele Leaves, I would say Steele Leaves is like maybe 2 good outings away. Now, I was very impressed with the way he threw the ball the other day. I thought he's had a very, very productive offseason. Of course, we kind of expected him to be in this mix, and I think most of you, for the most part, probably do trust Steele Leaves. I also trust Steele Leaves, but bona fide circle of trust, not quite. And it's not because he didn't throw well enough the other day. He threw great. You just that was his first time throwing in a high leverage situation on a weekend. That was the first time for Steele Leaves. So I would say if he, comes in against Xavier, does a good job, maybe closes out a game or something like that, I'll start to really, really consider it. And I think I could very much see us going into SEC play knowing for sure that Steele Leaves is a circle of trust guy. A few other guys on this list, Ethan McElvain fits a similar criteria where he threw outstanding yesterday. In fact, you can make an argument, and McElvain threw as well as any Razorback reliever not named Gibbler or McGuire. He's probably going to work his way into the circle of trust. He's an older guy, been in the SEC, gotten a lot of experience. But you gotta show us something on the weekend as a Razorback. So there's plenty of time. Ethan McElvain certainly on that watch list, as well as the other 2 Razorback transfer pitchers, James DeCramer, the Oregon State transfer, who threw a couple scoreless innings on Sunday. Jackson Kershaw, who threw 1 inning and then tried to come out for another and didn't go well for him, gave up a run in his 1 inning of work on Saturday. I expect both guys to have a strong chance to end up, solidifying a real, late inning type of role for Arkansas and could be circle of trust guys. But as of right now, you got to earn that spot. You got to earn it. And the same could be said. I mentioned Mark Brissy and Peyton Lee earlier, the 2 freshmen. They are very much on my radar for circle of trust, as is Cooper Dossett, who, of course, coming out of week 1, did not have a great outing, did not go well for him. We'll see if he's able to kind of bounce back. Obviously, if his outings continue to look like that, he's going to be very far away from the circle of trust, but he's still very much, he's on the watch list for now. And we'll see if it ends up being one of those watch lists like KJ Jefferson on the Heisman watch list, going into 2021 or something like that. So we'll see how it evolves a little bit. But let's go ahead and get into your chats, man. And appreciate everybody for doing this, man, and hopping in the middle of a work day. We're going to start with our guy, Lane Hedge, who says, I hope DVH's comments about the offense, either buying in or sitting in the dugout, lights a fire under these guys. Looking forward to seeing how the offense looks this weekend and leading up to SEC play. Yeah, I definitely agree with this. And listen, in terms of it firing them up, it definitely should. It's very rare during a baseball season that your coach makes a big picture proclamation like that. Because baseball, as we know, it's such a high variance sport. It's a long season. And we talk about it all the time, not getting too high, not getting too low. That's usually how most coaches, but especially DVH, like to operate. There's been a lot of times where Arkansas's had rough outings offensively, and he's like, hey, we're not benching anybody. We're not going to change up what we do. Like, we're going to stick to what we got going on. There's no need to make any crazy overreactions. He did not do that this time. Now, do I think that Dave thinks that the offense sucks and they're screwed and they're going to have to bench the entire starting lineup? No, I think he's kind of trying to send a message, but that kind of tells you that this might be a little moment where, maybe there are some different discussions. Maybe there are some, more in-depth discussions about what the approach is, what these guys need to be doing. And when you have 46 strikeouts in 4 games against some good level, high-level pitching, but not all, I definitely think that's a time for you to look in the mirror. And we've always said that strikeouts are going to happen. We kind of understand that and we accept it for the most part. But when you have something like that early in the season, I think that's a time for you to kind of take a step back and really assess what you're doing, which is good to hear, because for the most part, you don't see teams like the approach is the approach. It's very rare that teams change up their approach. As much as we may think that and as much as it may seem like that, where you see them face a bad team and they score 12 runs, oh, that was a great approach. And then they play a good team and they strike out 12 times and score 1 run. And it's like, oh, that was a bad approach. Well, their approach was the same. They just faced different pitches and had different results. It's rare, again, to see a coach kind of really go out on a limb like that and be like, hey, we got to make some changes, especially after a 3-1 weekend. So I'm definitely interested to see kind of what the vibes are like. I'm sure Dave is going to have a press conference before the Xavier series this weekend. I'll be interested to hear what he has to say in terms of, did y'all do anything different? Did you have some tough conversations? Like, what does that look like? Very interesting stuff for sure. Looking forward to seeing how they bounce back. And our guy Ryan wants to know, Andrew, it's only 4 games in, but do you think we are maximizing Gibbler's value if he's in the bullpen? It seems to me he would be a bigger difference maker as a starter unless he's in the Cops role. So there's a lot you have to consider with this. Anytime you're talking about someone's role, you can look at them and what they're doing, but really you're trying to account for the full team, the full spectrum, and sort of what's the best way to get the most out of all these guys. And so, yeah, in terms of, you can look at Cole Gibbler and say, well, he threw 3 2/3 innings the other day. Cole Gibbler's good. I would be good with him throwing 5 or 6 innings. Yeah, I can totally see that, which, by the way, if there hadn't been a run rule, he was going to end up throwing 4 2/3 innings, which is pretty much a starter's workload. So to answer your question, yes, I do think they're going to be able to maximize his value. But again, I also think that you can't make the assumption that, hey, Cole Gibbler threw 3 2/3 scoreless innings. If we just start him on Saturday, he's going to do that and he's going to throw a higher workload against a different lineup, and it's just going to be the same results. That is an assumption you cannot make, because I remember us having not us, but I remember like the fan base down the stretch of Gackel's freshman year, people were like baffled that Arkansas wouldn't start Gackel. They thought it was crazy. And in fact, it got to the point where the coaching staff considered it. If Arkansas had advanced to the Super Regionals, I think you might have seen Gabe Gackel make his first career start. And as we found out during his sophomore year, sometimes it's not that simple. Sometimes changing the role, sometimes changing, because you got to understand, preparing to go into a game as a relief pitcher, completely different than preparing to go into a game to start. The way you throw, the way you prepare, the way you mentally approach it, the way that the offense approaches you. If you're announced as a starter, you know what that offense is going to do all week? They're going to prepare to face you. And so, really, what I'm getting at is that I'm not saying Cole Gibbler wouldn't have a ton of success as a starter, but I think right now the role that Cole Gibbler is in, he is doing tremendous. And I wouldn't really win. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. So in terms of Gibbler's role and his value, I don't see a big need to switch it up. Now, if Hunter Dietz continues to struggle and, maybe you say, Big Tone is good, but I want some more stuff there. I want some more strikeouts or whatever. Okay, we can maybe, think about that a little bit. But I think in terms of Gibbler's value, he came into a 3-2 game the other day and pretty much ended it. Like, the game was over when he entered the game. To me, that's tremendously valuable, especially if you're going 3, 4, 5 innings. Plus, I think they're going to do a thing where, He might throw 2 innings on Friday, 2 on Sunday, maybe 3 on Friday, 1 on Sunday, 1 and 2, something like that. So I think there's a chance that you maybe see him close out 2 different games for Arkansas. In terms of the Kevin Kopps role, that is not a thing. There's no such thing as a Kevin Kopps role. Kevin Kopps, like that was a complete anomaly. They're not doing that with Cole Gibbler, and I would not advise them to do that. And so that's kind of where I stand on it. Is like, if it ain't broke, why are we looking to fix it? Is kind of where I stand with Gibbler. And again, you have the right to, if you get to April and you say, you know what, we think he's just good enough, and Dietz is struggling, let's just pull the trigger and do it. I think they definitely would consider it. It's not like nobody, me, the coaching staff, or Gibbler himself, nobody has said they won't start Cole Gibbler. In fact, and we've all said the exact opposite. I think I've been saying it for a year now. His destiny is going to be a weekend starter. He's eventually going to be a weekend starter at Arkansas. The coaching staff, Van Horn and Hobbs, have both said that publicly. He's going to eventually be a weekend starter. I just don't know why it's like right now we have to do it. You know what I mean? Does that make sense? That's kind of where I stand. Razor House DF says, does Carson Brumball's plate appearances over the 4 games concern you? I'll tell you, my answer differs from, I think, everyone else, because I think everyone else saw a very different thing play out with Carson Brumball. Now you look at the results. The results are Carson Brumball is 2 for 17 right now, which obviously that concerns me. Yeah, I think Carson Brumball is going to have to hit better than 118 if Arkansas, if he's going to stay in the lineup, and Arkansas is going to be great. But you asked, do his plate appearances concern me? And to that, I say no. Now, would I like to see him walk a little bit more? Sure. But he had some hard hit balls that didn't go through. He had like a 103 mile an hour ground ball. He had a 108 mile an hour line out to third base. Like, he had a few batted balls that were hard, and he only struck out 4 times in 4 games, which isn't like not going to give him a cherry or give him a cookie for not striking out a bunch of times. But I didn't see him having uncompetitive ABs. I didn't see him. As a matter of fact, I know there wasn't a time where it was just 3-pitch strikeout, see you later. He's fouling off pitches. He's working in the count. He's taking some borderline ones. I didn't see a Carson Brumball that was overmatched, or a Carson Brumball that isn't going to be able to get it done at the plate. Now, obviously, the results, you got to have better results. Eventually, you got to start finding some grass. You got to find ways to get a few of those through, and I think he will. But I am a lot less concerned about Brumball than I think most people are. I think a lot of people are pretty much over it, which is interesting to me. Interesting. Our guy L, really appreciate L. He's always in here in the chat. He says, do you think Ethan McIlvain will have a bigger role down the road? This is an easy will. And Dave spoke about this a little bit after the game yesterday, where he was like, listen, him pitching on Monday was not a sign that they don't like him and they're just gonna, he's sitting there, gonna do his thing with the freshman or whatever. I think he was up in the bullpen multiple times throughout the weekend, just didn't quite get in. In fact, Dave said he might be one of the first lefties out of the bullpen. I definitely think he's going to have a bigger role, a future circle of trust guy, if I had to guess. And I think Ethan McIlvain's a closing option. I think he's that good. And the thing with him is his command throughout his career at Vanderbilt was just all over the map. In fact, I think he walked 1 per inning at Vanderbilt last year in a little over 30 innings. And so that was the most encouraging part about his outing yesterday, is not only did he not walk anybody, he maybe only had one 3-ball count. He really wasn't that close. I think he threw 30 strikes and 41 pitches. And so that's big time. I think that's a very good sign for him. The stuff is, without a doubt, he's got the stuff, no doubt about that. He's got the look, he's got some experience, he's gone through some ups and downs. And so that's I'm definitely bullish on what Ethan McIlvain can do. And I think all 3 of those transfers, him to Kramer and Kersher, all 3 have the stuff to be big pieces for Arkansas. And I think they're all going to be counted on at different points in time. And then, another question about Landon Schaefer. Has he gotten off to the slow start since he got to campus? I remember when you were talking about the draft this past summer, he was our biggest draft risk out of high school. So I'm just going to, how do I word this? So he's definitely gotten off to a slow start. He's gotten better. He's gotten a little bit better in scrimmages and starting to actually have some competitive ABs. But it's not a surprise or a crazy thing that 4 freshmen played and he was not one of them. That is, that's just, if you were to do the pecking order of how good the freshmen have been at Arkansas this offseason, Brumball and Turner, I would say, have safely separated from the pack. Rutenbar's not too far behind. Alexander Peck, who you saw got out there in a pinch hit situation the other day, then got a start on Sunday. He had some flashes specifically in the fall. That's kind of those are the four guys that have. They've all four been safely better offensively than Landon Schaefer, and that's not a knock on him. He's still a good baseball player. He's still a guy that I think in a couple of years could wind up being a legitimate draft prospect. He got some horrible advice last summer. I'll just say that. He got some absolutely horrible advice. I don't know what the numbers were that he was being offered, but I have a hard time imagining that like those numbers are going to be available later in his career. Even if he does end up being a nice little player and a nice little prospect, I don't know. I think he probably should reevaluate the people that are in his life. Yeah, I see our boy Daniel Sheehan here is saying, let's see. What does he have to say? He says the one concern for him is Ks, which being strikeouts. The one concern for me is Ks. For comparison, 2025 Arlington, they struck out 24 times versus 2026 Arlington 39 times, which I'm assuming that 39 is in 3 games, the 3 actual weekend games. The strikeout rate is without a doubt the most concerning aspect of this Razorback team coming out of the weekend. And again, we know that that's going to happen sometimes, but the thing for me is that I don't think they faced like crazy, unreal pitching. There were some really good arms. I think Texas Tech, by the way, threw out better arms than I thought they were going to. They had a freshman lefty throwing 95, which I did not expect. They also had another guy that was like, I think one of the guys that closed for them was like 94, 95 as well. So there was some good stuff. I think the lefty Brassfield for TCU is going to be a big-time prospect in next year's draft. He's a little bit Cole Gibblery, and so, again, that makes sense. And then Noah Franco, who closed the game for TCU, that's a big-time arm. He was up to 98 from the left side. And so you faced some good arms, but for the most part, it wasn't like this crazy, you weren't facing like Hagen Smith, like 18 innings worth of Hagen Smith or anything like that. That's definitely a little concerning, no doubt about that. Let's see what our guy Finch had to say. He said, I'd love to hear Ellis's thoughts on this. Back in my day, we strived for line drives with some loft. Nowadays, they only strive for loft. Which do you prefer and why? Well, so Finch, this is one of those things where it's like your take on this situation is rooted in not real life, which I don't know how to word that other than that. Like it's not a thing where even Nate Thompson himself would literally tell you, like, our goal is to hit a line drive as hard as we possibly can. Are you eventually sometimes going to pull and, elevate the baseball a little bit? Sure. And they do use that word backspin of you do want that backspin where that ball carries a little bit more. But the idea that like Arkansas or any other high level baseball organization is out here telling guys, hey, let's try and loft the ball. Don't worry about hitting it hard. Don't worry about hitting it on a line. Just try and loft. Not really an accurate reflection of what goes on. But I understand when you strike out, it's like, okay, that's I can look at the strikeout and see that that's bad. Let's see. Jaron Green says, Andrew, your DVH, give your batting order for Friday. I got to be honest with you. Not terribly dissimilar from what it looked like, which, by the way, leads me to like kind of the next conversation I want to have about this lineup is like, because I get being concerned and being like, hey, the results early on, just kind of okay. What is it that y'all think should happen? Because like I think there's certain guys you can maybe look to, and like Nolan Souza in the DH spot. I think that was a guy that DVH was talking about. You could say, hey, maybe he's not quite ready to roll. That maybe that injury's not fully healed. Maybe mentally he's just not quite where he needs to be. Like maybe you need to make a move there. Well, that's your DH spot. So that doesn't really affect anything. So it's like if you sub him out, it's whatever. In fact, they started someone else on Sunday, but like I don't think I'm in the camp of like let's bench Carson Brumball or anything like that. Damian Ruiz, it was supposed to be a coin flip. I don't think it's a coin flip anymore. I think that's your left fielder. I think Micah New's your center fielder. I think Kahio Aloy, if he's healthy, is your DH, is your right fielder. Pompey third, Kojal at second, like Reese Robinette at first. So we'll go batting order. Damian Ruiz 1. I think that's, at least for now, until he cools off. I like having Damian Ruiz there. So if we've got a righty there, I'll go 2 righties. Ruiz at the top, Helfrich second, Kojal 3, Kahio Aloy 4, I would go Reese Robinette 5. I would go Micah New 6. I would go Nolan Souza 7. I would go TJ Pompey 8. Carson Brumbaugh 9. Or, the bottom 3 you can kind of move around however you want. I tried to go as much right, left, right as I could. But frankly, I think I would roll with more or less the same lineup and just see if you can get these guys going a little bit. I'm definitely not of the mindset where I'm like, oh, you've got to, make all these big adjustments. I see our guy David here said, what about Fisher? I'm assuming that's in relation to the circle of trust. The circle of trust, I'm referring to bullpen arms. Gabe Gackle, yeah, circle of trust. That's kind of him, Dietz, and Fisher, kind of separate conversation. But yeah, those 3 guys for sure. You're going to start them each weekend. I imagine they're going to run with the same starting lineup. Yeah, those guys for sure. And let's see. Papa Dragon wants to know how many freshmen in the year in the circle of trust. This is a great question. So I think Brissy is the most firm candidate to be a circle of trust guy. Most firm guy that, I think at this point, I'd be probably surprised if Brissy didn't have some type of role on the weekend by the end of the year. The thing with Peyton Lee is that I think they might just roll him in this midweek starting role. So I think he's probably not going to be pitching on the weekends a ton, at least early in the season, which is fine because Arkansas's got plenty of guys to do the job. But I don't think if he's the midweek starter, I can necessarily put him in that circle of trust. Lorenzini would be the next guy up, and we didn't get to see him throw this weekend, which kind of bummed me out. That's why I'm mad at the offense more than anything, because you didn't get a couple more arms in there. Lorenzini, I think, is going to have a real nice chance, and so I'm going to go 2. I think some combination of 2 between Brissy, Lorenzini, and Lee, and I could see it being really any of those 3 guys. All righty, I see producer John is in the chat, which we love to see. We love to see it. And then I see my guy Porkenstein, who usually has pretty solid baseball takes. He says Gibbler will get starters innings in leverage situations, which I do think is possible. I mean, that's pretty much what was about to happen. If they didn't get a run rule, he was going to go 4 2/3, which is, that's a starter's workload for the most part. I also think I come back to Colin Fisher, for example, he threw 5 innings the other day on Sunday, but then there was a high leverage situation where, Arkansas needed outs and they had to go to a few different guys. I feel like Steele Eves' 2 1/3 I'm not saying they were more valuable, and obviously Colin Fisher was outstanding. He didn't give up a run, struck out 8. He was outstanding, but it's I look at Steele Eves and Colin Fisher on Sunday, and I'm like, y'all had a pretty similar effect on this game in terms of value. So I don't, when I look at Gibbler, and if he has a weekend, let's say this weekend he comes in, Arkansas is up 6-4 going into the 7th on Friday. If he closes out those 3 innings and Arkansas wins that game, that to me is way more valuable than Colin Fisher throwing 5 innings on Sunday, which is how I felt going into the weekend. It's still kind of how I feel. And so, I again, coming out of the weekend where Cole Gibbler was so good as a bullpen guy, I didn't come out of that being like, yeah, we should change his role. It'd be very interesting. Peyton, our guy Peyton from Blue Ember, shout out to Blue Ember Smokehouse. He says, just getting in here and could have been addressed, but what are some other DH options that DVH could use moving forward? So honestly, there's plenty of DH options for the most part. I mean, especially because Souza is not quite healthy enough to play the field. We'll see if he's able to play the field at some point, but if he is, that immediately makes someone like, Kihio Eloy, who DH last year, obviously could be an option. Zach Stewart, who only got 1 AB. He got to start on Monday, only got 1 AB, did strike out in that 1 AB. I think he would be a guy that you'd consider. Carter Rudenbar is a stud, dude. I like the way he swings the bat. I think he was 1 for 5 this weekend, so not like crazy numbers or anything, but I think he's a freshman bat that they really like. Now, he's left-handed, and Nolan Souza is also left-handed, so that and Zach Stewart is also left-handed, and Christian Turner is also left-handed, so it kind of makes it tough for them to platoon the position necessarily, although maybe Alexander Peck gets in that mix a little bit. Maybe Landon Schaefer comes out of nowhere and he ends up making a run there, but I that's one thing that I think this Razorback lineup or Razorback roster is kind of missing is a right-handed bat off the bench. Someone like a Charlie Welch or whatever. And last year, I feel like Arkansas had just a lot of depth there. And of course, Kihio Eloy was your DH every day. And so you could really just bring in left-handed hitters off the bench. But I think those are going to be some of those options. And we'll just kind of see with Souza. If he ends up playing, in the field, kind of opens up a few different possibilities. Hopefully, Kahio gets back healthy and he's able to just kind of solidify his spot there in right field and be fine. Let's see. Samuel Brooks wants to know who's going to be at the bottom of the SEC standings. Well, I think Missouri's always a team you got to think about in that context because they are always bad, and I think they lost a game or two this weekend. Missouri's probably going to be down there. There's not many SEC teams that are going to be bad at baseball this year. In fact, I saw somebody's power rankings the other day that had Georgia at like 12, which I don't agree with. I think Georgia's going to be better than that, but I'm like, geez, if Georgia's the 12th best team in the league, then we're all like really in for a long SEC play. Alabama's an interesting one. I don't think they're going to be bad, but like they're a team that I think might wind up being in the bottom of the conference just by default. Ole Miss should be good because they have a very experienced Friday night starter and a little bit of talent in the lineup. I don't think they're going to be great, and I don't think they're going to be bad, but somebody's got to finish in the bottom. Maybe Kentucky, who knows? But Oklahoma's a team that I think people probably would have said Oklahoma looked awesome, man. Love that. Love to see that from Oklahoma. I'm excited for their season. I think they're kind of a little bit underrated a little bit. There's not many SEC teams that I can look at you and be like, yeah, they're for sure going to be bad. We shall see. Let's see. Michael Kopesky. Love this. He says, Andrew, how is it that Oklahoma can smoke TCU with the far less lineup and yet Arkansas hitters struggled mightily? Well, they played on different days and through different pitchers. And so, these things, it's one. And also like we're talking about the sport of baseball. There's going to be a lot of that going around. I'm sure Tarleton is going to lose a game 14-2 at some point. I'm sure Arkansas is going to get run ruled at some point this year. I'm sure Oklahoma is going to get run ruled at some point this year. Because I think if we do this conversation in a few weeks, we could say, how Oklahoma, they were so good in Arlington. How are they now losing games to Wichita State? It's like just the way these sports work, but it's tough to do the apples to apples comparison. And I didn't watch much of the Oklahoma TCU game on Sunday. I was driving back at that point. I have no idea. I know TCU threw Lance Davis to start, Arkansas's former Arkansas pitcher Lance Davis. That's the answer to your question though, Kopesky. How did that happen? Well, TCU started a guy who was not even on the travel roster for Arkansas last year. That is TCU's Sunday starter. And Arkansas faced their sophomore left-handed pitcher who's, a top 50 prospect in his class. Very different situation to try and do. But yeah, that's I hate to say it because I know it's a cliche, but that's baseball for you. Ooh, let's see this. Emily wants to know which player is more valuable to a lineup, a consistent get on base hitter or a power hitter with a high strikeout rate. So obviously, like it's a balance a little bit. Like I'd have to kind of see the numbers of how it plays out, but certainly you need those guys that are consistent that get on base. And so, and frankly, for Arkansas, what's been nice is that the last few years, if you look at who have been the best players in Arkansas's lineup, it's very rarely an either or type of thing. If you look at for instance, like last year, Logan Maxwell led Arkansas in batting average with 356. He also hit 13 home runs and was banged up for half the year. Right behind him was Vahiva Aloy, who led the team in home runs, hit 21, was a Golden Spikes winner. And so Cam Kojal was up there in batting average last year. He hit 333. He also had 15 home runs. He also hit a couple this weekend. And so for Arkansas, it's kind of interesting that they don't really have – they do have a little bit of a mix of skill sets a little bit, but they usually their high average guys are also usually powerful hitters. And so maybe Damian Ruiz can kind of throw a wrench in this because he's a guy that only hit 7 home runs last year at Lamar. I don't think he had hit many at Houston Christian before that. And so not a super powerful bat. I don't expect Damian Ruiz to hit 15 home runs for Arkansas this year, but the way he's getting on base, that might prove to be more valuable than anybody in this Razorback lineup. So that's, it'll be very interesting to see. And maybe that's a discussion we can have. But if I'm being honest with you, you got to have those power hitters though, man. Because those power hitters make opponents fear you and they pitch you differently based on power. And so if you have a lineup full of guys who are scrappy, get on base guys that don't have power, pitchers would sign up to face that 10 times out of 10. than they would a lineup with 10 dudes that, hit for a ton of power, even if they think they can strike them out. Because even if you're striking guys out, you're having to throw 4, 5, 6 pitches per AB usually. So we shall see. We shall see. Okay, man. I see we got a lot of chats in here. A lot of familiar faces here. Let's see. I want to use this comment to talk about this for a little bit because James here says over the past 5 years, hitting with runners on base and or in scoring position has been Arkansas's Achilles heel in close games and losses. Always hear deviation pressers saying didn't get the big hit. And so this is where I come back to that is how baseball works. And I'm not saying like, hey, that's baseball, you should be happy about it. I'm just saying like the team that loses the game in baseball more often than not, especially if it's a close game, the team that loses is most likely the team that couldn't get a big hit with runners in scoring position. And in fact, if you look on the other side of it, Arkansas's pitchers, you want to know what they've done really well through 4 games so far? Arkansas's pitchers have not allowed many hits, if at all, any, with runners in scoring position. That's how you win baseball games. You get guys out when there are chances for them to score. When you have runners on first and second, your pitcher hunkers down and executes pitches. But this is what's frustrating to me about this is that we have to be able to have some type of nuance because you say over the past 5 years, well, what happened last year? Because Arkansas was number 2 in the SEC in runners in scoring position. They were number 1 in the SEC in 2-out hitting. They were number 1 in the SEC with a runner on third and less than 2 outs. They were very good situationally last year because they were a very good lineup. I don't think Arkansas changed anything in fact, I know they didn't roll out a different approach last year compared to 2024 when they sucked in all those situations. They were just a better lineup. And so this year, I don't know where Arkansas is going to finish in the SEC in runs scored or batting average or on-base percentage or slugging, but let's say they finish 5th. I'm going to go out on a limb and say they're going to be right around 5th with runners in scoring position. If you're a good lineup, you get those hits. You know what I mean? That's just kind of how these things work. And so we'll see. Perhaps this will be the 1 year where there's a huge discrepancy, but usually look at where Arkansas ranks in batting average. That's probably about where they ranked in batting average with runners in scoring position. In 2023, Arkansas was middle of the pack in the SEC in batting average. They were middle of the pack in the SEC in runners in scoring position. In 2024, they were at the bottom of the SEC in batting average. They were at the bottom of the SEC with runners in scoring position. And then last year, they were at the top of the SEC. And they were at the top of the SEC with runners in scoring position. And so, everyone always says, oh, same old story with Arkansas. If you think it's the same old story, then that tells me you lack the ability to understand differences between anything. You lack the ability to look at data and see how it varies. And, hey, they were bad here, they were good here. And, okay, there's different years. Like the idea that it's like, oh, it's just the same old story every year is not exactly a true statement. Interesting. Saucy 2 times says, how heavily pursued was TJ Pompey in the transfer portal? Were programs like LSU and Tennessee after him? So I don't know who all he visited because I feel like he visited Arkansas fairly early and, committed on his visit. There really wasn't much to that. I do know, and I don't know I'm not going to give you an exact number here. I do know that if we were talking about allocation of resources, TJ Pompey cost more than the other transfers. He cost more than Micah New. He cost more than Damian Ruiz, and both Micah New and Damian Ruiz were also heavily pursued by some other programs. I haven't talked to TJ about that. I don't really. The only interaction I've ever had with TJ was in the elevator the other day, and I did not ask him about this. So I don't know for sure what teams offered him, what teams were there, but he was like a top 30 player in the transfer portal. So I'm going to go out on a limb and say a lot of people. And he's also a top 120 draft prospect. So if LSU and Tennessee are not after him, I know that the Kansas City Royals are after him. But they that was one where TJ, they kind of had to we always say drop a bag. That would be what they did with TJ Pompey. Shout out to Local Lime. That was big time. Let's see. Okay, here we are. And this is another similar question where it says, would you rather have a hitter hitting 400 with very little power or a guy with an average under 250 but is a plus 25 home run guy? So once again, you have to show me the walk rates. That would be the determining factor here, because if there's a guy that's hitting 400 but he's not walking, and he's not hitting for power, you're probably looking at it like an 850 OPS, maybe even less. Maybe not less, but about 850 to 900 OPS. You can hit under 250. You can hit 245, but if you're walking a ton, your on base percentage might be 380, 390. And so that guy who's hitting 400, if he's not drawing walks, his on base percentage might be 420, 430, in which case you will gladly eat the difference there because the slugging would be vastly different. So, I would obviously need way more context, would need way more information before I could answer your question. But generally, that is how you have guys who have a substantially lower batting average who are way more valuable players. I'll give you an example. Brent Iredale. I know everybody hates Brent Iredale because he strikes out and all that. Brent Iredale, in terms of like wins above replacement, was like top 7 among all third basemen in college baseball last year because he drew a ton of walks. He worked a ton of, long ABs. He also hit home runs. He also hit doubles. And, of course, he was also very good defensively. He got hit by a ton of pitches as well. And so Brent Iredale hits 280 or whatever. He was more valuable to Arkansas's lineup than a lot of guys. Now Arkansas's lineup had a ton of different guys who were valuable there. But, you could look at a guy that was hitting 330 with 5 home runs, infinitely less valuable than what Brent Iredale was for Arkansas last year. Let's see. Okay. So Pooh Bear here with a great comment where he says, I don't care about any of these stats until we get to that Mississippi State series. We need more data. This is accurate. This is 100% accurate. And now I'm not saying because obviously we're going to talk about some of the stats and we're going to, read off numbers and stuff, but he's 100% right in that if you're trying to make a definitive proclamation about, Carson Brumbaugh can't hit or even frankly, Damian Ruiz is the best hitter we've ever seen, you need to see a lot more before that happens. Because any of these guys, literally everyone on the team, if Damian Ruiz goes 0 for 12 this upcoming weekend at Xavier, his numbers are going to look completely different. And all of a sudden you'll say, oh, dang, man, maybe he's not just going to get on base 80% of the time. And if Carson Brumbaugh goes 5 for 14, all of a sudden his numbers across the board are going to look pretty damn good. And 5 for 14 is not even like that crazy of a thing. So it's like, I think you definitely need a lot more data before making any type of definitive proclamation, like truly. Not to say that we can't evaluate these things, not that we can't say, hey, disappointed in this guy's performance or whatever. You definitely need to wait and see a little bit. Let's see. Big Donnelly says, the team had an arrogance about them when the weekend started. I think we look humbled by Monday. Hopefully this will motivate to work harder. Nice to have 4 dudes with 15 home runs last season. Interesting. Thought they looked a little arrogant out there, huh? I don't know if I for sure saw that, but also I wasn't at the game Monday. I was just having to kind of listen a little bit. So I don't know how humbled they were by the end of it. We talked to John a little bit about how he was at that practice Friday or Thursday and was like, man, they were very loose. They were very just kind of casual vibes going. And we didn't know if that was like a good thing or if it was like, oh man, is that a great sign? Is that a bad sign? Like, what are we thinking about there? I think there's probably something to that. I also think it's like, I think I've always pushed back against the narrative that Arkansas doesn't have a ton of guys who have some personality and like to showboat, like to pimp home runs, like to get excited whenever they have a big strikeout. So what some people look at and say, oh, that's arrogance, a pitcher striking someone out and showing some emotion, that's cool to me. That doesn't really strike me as arrogant. Or Ryder Helfrich celebrating as he's running around the bases. That's all good. Papa Dragon here with a good comment because this is Luis Arias is a prime example. I think he led the league. He hit damn near 400 one year, and I think he maybe ended up finishing around 360 or something like that. I think Luis Arias is like the prime example of a guy who has a high batting average that does not contribute to winning in any way, shape, or form. Very much so. There are examples of this. I'm sure Daniel Shee could rattle off a few Angels who had high batting averages that weren't effective baseball players. Let's see. Daniel Shee says, Souza started 1 for 21 last year. Usually you don't start evaluating MLB stats until 60 games, which is the entire college season. I'm trying to figure out what this means. Because I'm with you in terms of like you kind of, MLB, that is a good kind of barometer of like, yeah, about a third of the way through the season, now you can really start evaluating. So yeah, I'm with that. I guess I don't get the Souza aspect. I guess, yeah, because he started 1 for 21 last year, and then what is he this year? Like 2 for 14 or whatever. And so, yeah, you add these two things together. Maybe Nolan Souza just has a February baseball problem. Maybe in fact, there might be something to this because the Hawaiians, because Vahiva Aloy was famously a little bit of a slow starter too. He started his sophomore year real bad to the point where I remember being in Arlington and people were like, why is this guy playing shortstop? I remember that being a thing. Maybe these Hawaiians just don't adjust well to when it's, until the weather gets a little bit warmer. I don't know. But yeah, for Souza, he's definitely, I mean, listen, he's the one that, frankly, I'm not saying like Souza's screwed or like he's in trouble or anything like that. He is the one guy that I think DVH's comments were maybe more pointed to a little bit. But even him, like, what's the alternative? Are you just going to like DH Zach Stewart? Because if you don't like strikeouts and you're probably not going to like Zach Stewart at DH. I mean, Carter Rutenbar's a stud. I hope he gets some opportunities for sure. But I think Souza's probably going to stay in the lineup for a while, unless it just gets really bad. But we'll see how he responds a little bit. He also looked good on Friday night. I thought his at-bats Friday were pretty solid. And then he does have David Fletcher, who, by the way, you guys know David Fletcher, brother of Dominic. It's actually crazy because Dominic was a very different player than his brother David being an infielder. And they're both kind of short, stocky guys. But David was a big time, had a high batting average, but doesn't really draw a ton of walks, doesn't really hit for power. And, you can look at it and say, oh, this guy's hitting 310. This guy's a stud. And then he'll have like a WAR of like negative 0.4, which WAR is a little bit of a stupid stat or whatever. But, that he's definitely a good example of that, which is weird because Dominic always hit for power. In fact, Dominic was kind of a little bit of didn't mind swinging and missing as long as he could hit some home runs. And, we'll see how Dominic's pro career turns out. Speaking of pro careers, Samuel wants to know who on this team will be the best pro. Ryder? Yeah, Ryder, I feel like, is probably the safest bet just because there's so many tools there. Like his arm is above average. His athleticism for the position is well above average. The power is certainly there. Hit tool is probably right around average. And then I think his glove defensively, like his framing, people love. The scouts really love his framing. I know the Razorbacks love his framing. They have the technology, because they, the TrackMan zone, which isn't always 100% accurate, but they are able to track how many times you are getting a strike call on a ball that is out of the zone. And according to the people on staff, Ryder Helfrich is like through the roof at that. And if you watch him, you watch some of these Razorback games and you see the way he frames pitches, you can kind of see some of those. And so, I think there's the thing with Ryder is like, I don't like the worst case scenario for him is that he's just a backup catcher in the MLB one day. You know what I mean? And so I think he's a pretty safe bet, whereas pretty much any other prospect on the team, you don't have that. Although Gackle, I got to say, I think he's a guy that, I mean, he's a projected fringe first rounder right now. Both him and Helfrich are kind of in that range. No matter what prospect list I look at, you're usually seeing like Helfrich in the low to mid 20s, and then Gackle kind of in the mid 20s to mid 30s range. So they're right around the same in terms of like where they're projected, 4 or 5 months or whatever. I think Gackle's another one where a pretty safe bet. Now, he's not as tall, long, and projectable as some of these other pitching prospects that you see. A lot of times you see these like the pitchers that you see nowadays are like 6'5", 6'6", long, rangy dudes. Gackle's a little bit more short, stocky, which is interesting. So when I'm trying to think about him as a pro prospect, I wonder how scouts feel about that. But the fastball wasn't even throwing that hard the other day, but like the fastball's mid to high 90s with a ton of spin. It's a swing and miss pitch. He's got the slider, which is a well above average breaking pitch. The curveball people think is maybe his most underrated pitch. He doesn't use the curveball a ton, but it does grade out well from a metric standpoint. And the changeup, I think he got 2 swings and misses for strikeouts with the changeup the other day. Again, doesn't use it nearly as much as his slider, but you could make a very real argument that Gabe Gackle has 4+ pitches. And you hear people say that sometimes where they're like, oh, this guy's got 3+ pitches. Well, maybe for college, but like if you're grading out pitches on a, big picture standpoint. Like, for example, Cole Gibbler, you'll hear, he's got 2+ pitches, fastball, slider. Cole Gibbler's fastball, as of right now, is not a plus pitch in the terms of MLB scouting of like. Now, will it be by the time he leaves Arkansas? Will it be this year? I don't know. The slider is really the plus pitch. So I think sometimes you hear, this guy's got 3+ pitches, 4+ pitches. With Gabe Gackle, he really does have arguably 4+ pitches, and I think a lot of teams feel that way. And so I think that's he's a guy where I don't see a path to Gabe Gackle just not being a good pro. Obviously, Hunter Dietz, could wind up being the highest drafted out of all these dudes, but I think he's a little bit more of a risk in terms of just the projectability. Is, the health going to be there? Like, is the command going to be there? Is he going to be a starter full time? We don't know, but I think Helfrich and Gackle are probably the safest bets to be pretty good. I'm trying to think if there's any younger guys that like are maybe underrated in this regard. I think Brumball, by the way, weirdly enough, I'm going to go ahead and position myself this week because everybody's so low on Carson Brumball, which is just bonkers to me. Which I think I was actually texting with Andrew Hutchinson a couple weeks ago, and we were kind of making some like predictions for like, hey, who's going to be a fan favorite? Who's going to be someone the fans don't like? And we called it where we were like, I think there's a couple candidates on this team to get off to a slow start and fans will overreact. And Brumball was like number one, like -400 to be that guy because of all this preseason, all SEC, preseason player of the year, all this. And so, of course, he starts 2 for 16 or whatever. And now everyone's like, yeah, he sucks. I think Carson Brumball, I think he's going to be good for Arkansas this year. I'll just go ahead and say that. But I also think long-term as a prospect, he does so many things. Like you talk about tools that are above average. You guys saw that glove. The glove is good. The arm is like well above average. He's apparently touched 97 on the mound, which we're not going to see him on the mound, but 97 on the mound translates to whatever, mid-90s from the diamond. He had a double play the other day that he turned that I would have loved to see the metrics on the ball that he threw because he chunked it over there to first base, made some plays deep in the hole. He's a really, really good athlete with above average speed as well, above average power in the bat, which I would like to see him tap into a little bit. But I think Carson Brumball is a pretty safe bet that I'd be surprised if by the time he left Arkansas, he wasn't a really impactful player who's going to have a pretty bright pro future. And I believe Joe Doyle has him as like the number 33 prospect in the freshman class or whatever right now. And so that's interesting. Big Donnelly says Christian Turner reminds me of Peyton Stovall. I don't know if you knew this or not, or if this is maybe just a reference to that, but they did go to the same high school. They are from the same high school, same city, same everything. And I would imagine those guys have crossed paths a little bit. There was somebody the other day that I was watching Christian Turner and I was like, man, he looks a lot like this guy. Who was it? Who was it that I was thinking of Christian Turner the other day? But, that's an interesting comparison. What's with Turner, the power is really like, he's 6'2", 180, like kind of a long rangy kid. Those long arms can generate some real power. And I think that's something that you guys are going to really like seeing from him. I would say if I'm comparing him to Peyton Stovall, obviously like Peyton Stovall came to Arkansas a pretty good hitter. I know he struggled early in his freshman year, but the hit tool was never really in question with Peyton Stovall, and you saw it down the stretch of his freshman year. What he hit like 370 or something like that in the NCAA tournament. I would say Stovall was definitely more ahead of schedule in just terms of pure making contact, bat to ball skills, but athletically, I think Christian Turner's a better athlete, better speed, a little bit more explosiveness to him, and I think he's got more power in the tank right now than Stovall had as his freshman year. Now, Stovall ended up hitting whatever it was, 10 or 12 home runs as a junior, ended up being a pretty solid power hitter before he left Arkansas. I think Christian Turner is a guy that you add a few pounds of muscle to him, he kind of fills out a little bit. I can see Christian Turner his junior year being like a 20 home run dude and a real dynamic athlete on the base paths as well. That is, and Big Donald says he did not know that. So yeah, that is kind of funny that your brain made that comparison because they are from the same pipeline, man. Well, we've gone a little bit over an hour. I'm hoping I didn't miss any like real important chats. Let's see. I see. I'm gonna finish with this one because I just did not expect to see this one. Shout out to Casey. He says, "What do you think about the football team?" Well, I'll tell you, I have not listened yet to Silverfield's full press conference today or the talk with the coordinators. I am a little bit bummed out about Clint Trickett leaving, no longer being the quarterback coach at Arkansas, but good for him to go get an opportunity as an OC. Of course, you've got to take that if you can get it. Of course, you had also a D-line coach leave just last week, and so we'll see how they replace those guys there. I'm really pleased with what Arkansas did from a roster building standpoint. Not that Arkansas has like this elite roster that I think is going to like rival the greats in college football, but they had a lot of holes to fill. They had a lot of just, scholarship players. You just needed a ton of them. You looked at the DB room. I think they had like one scholarship returner in the entire DB room. And I don't know if that counts Miguel Mitchell or not because he entered the portal and then came back. But now you're coming out of the portal where they've got 15, 16 legitimate defensive backs who have played college football before. Now, will they end up being stars or not? I don't know, but you've at least got some depth there to work with. You've got a lot of coaches that can make it work. Same with the D-line. Arkansas had like 5 playable defensive linemen last year. I don't think they brought in a ton of like NFL players that are going to tear it up, but they have legitimately 8 to 10 defensive linemen that have actually played college football before. Getting Charlie Collins back was nice. So I'm encouraged by that. And I think some of their, like the Waller kid from Auburn, I think is good. Sackham Souls from Kentucky, nice little pass rush specialist. I think the defensive roster is like borderline average or above average in terms of SEC standards. Now we'll see how it plays out. Obviously, you got to keep everyone healthy, and we'll see how spring ball plays out. I'm not thrilled about the offensive football roster. I think they're just kind of okay at receiver. I think they're just kind of okay at running back. And quarterback, I really do like KJ Jackson, and I like the other kid, AJ. I think he's got a chance to be pretty good. I'm excited to watch that quarterback battle play out. But offense, they're going to really need to like hunker down and coach their asses off, which, if you're trying to get by on just schemes, you can do that offensively. You can't really do that defensively. You got to have dudes defensively. And will they have, real dudes or not, or just kind of playable SEC guys? I think on defense, the roster building they did is pretty good. Offense, they're going to be okay in terms of talent. So we'll see if if Cramsey and Silverfield have any kind of tricks up their sleeve. But I think they're probably going to be competitive. They'll be improved from 2-10. I feel pretty confident saying that. And I think the staff is doing a good job. I just don't think it's necessarily going to move the needle and equate to a ton of success right away. And really make a huge splash year one. But I do think they'll be competitive. Before we get out of here, though, I do. See this from Mobley, which is important. He says, did we touch on Kay Aloy and his hammy? Just a precautionary measure? No, we had not talked about it on the show, but I'm glad you asked because I've been meaning to talk about that. Precautionary measure is probably the way I would describe it. I kept my eye on him a good bit on Sunday because he left the game Saturday and then they didn't start him Sunday. But Dave said on the pregame radio that he would maybe be available as a pinch hit option if they needed him. Obviously, that didn't end up happening. But I watched him a good bit in warm-up Sunday, and he seemed fine. They didn't seem like he was limping, didn't seem like he was really worried about anything. And I can't imagine they would have even let him warm up if they thought there was a real issue going on there. Plus, it kind of gave you an opportunity to get some other guys some work. Cahillo, by the way, swung the bat really well in his 9 plate appearances before he went down with the injury. I would imagine he'll be back out there this weekend, but we'll just have to see because you never know. Hamstrings are a little bit weird. Logan Maxwell's hamstring bothered him pretty much up until like May. Like he was kind of in and out of the lineup and never really was able to string together a ton of consistency in terms of just being available. Was kind of out to the beginning of the year, then was in, and then sat out for a little bit, then was in, and then they had a couple of weekends there in late April, late May, or early May where he wasn't available. And then he ended up being fine down the stretch, but hopefully it's not something that lingers and they can figure it out. I said I was going to be done, but actually I'm going to rattle off a few fun facts for you guys before we leave. Thought you might find this interesting. Would you believe me if I told you that Micah New leads the team with 8 RBI? I didn't think Micah New was like outstanding this week or anything, and he struck out 6 times. And, there's definitely a lot more in there. Did have 2 hits yesterday, which was nice. But as of right now, leads the team with 8 runs driven in, which I just don't think many people would have expected having watched this weekend. And I know there were a lot of people that were like annoyed by him being in the middle of the lineup, which, does he need to produce and will he need to play better? Sure, but it shouldn't have been a surprise. Like, we all kind of knew Mike Anu was going to be in that mix, and we know there's the power there. We know he's been very dynamic, so I don't know why people were surprised by that. Few other quick notes here real quick. I predicted Arkansas's pitching staff to break or to go over 700 strikeouts for the year, which is going to need them to be right around 12 and a half strikeouts per game. They are at 12.75 strikeouts per game through 4. Obviously, we'll see how that, shakes out against other competition and all that. But hopefully they can kind of, add to this number in a big way the next few weeks so that by the time you get to SEC play, you can come down a little bit. But interesting there, very encouraging. Also, we talked about this yesterday's show a little bit. Hunter Dietz and Cooper Dossett, two guys that are coming off of long injury breaks here. Both of those guys made their first, or I guess Dietz threw an inning last year, but really their first outing in a while, for Dossett 2 years. Those two guys both gave up 4 earned runs respectively in 2.2 combined innings. Outside of that, for the entire team, 4 earned runs in about 32 innings, which equates to an ERA just over 1, which I did think was interesting. Nobody else on the team gave up multiple earned runs. Gabe Backel did give up 2 runs, but only gave up 1 earned run. So very nice stuff there. A few other notes, and these are not as good ones. Damian Ruiz and Cam Kojal combined to walk 12 times. They each had 6. The rest of the team, 8. 20 walks total through 4 games, 5 per game. Not a great number, and it's really not a great number when you take into account that 2 of your top returning players accounted for over half of them. Definitely got to get that walk rate up a good bit. Same could be said for hitting doubles, which, a little bit of an arbitrary thing, small sample size. We'll see how this plays out. But Reese Robinette had 3 doubles in the last 2 games. The rest of the team, 2 for the entire season. A little bit crazy there. But I'll leave you with a good note. Arkansas's middle infield had 25 fielding opportunities, committed 0 errors, which is good to see. Now, fielding opportunities is not just balls hit at them. It's, if there's a 6-4-3 double play, that's a fielding opportunity on the assist, fielding opportunity on the catch at second base, and then a fielding opportunity on the assist to first, and a fielding opportunity for the first baseman catching it. So a little bit tough there. But 25 fielding opportunities for those guys, 14 assists, 11 putouts, 0 errors. And really, I thought both Kojal and Brumbaugh specifically, I thought he was outstanding defensively. And I thought both those guys were really good. So I don't think those guys are going to be Jalen Battles, Robert Moore by any stretch. But I do think there's some encouraging signs. Arkansas only committed 2 errors all weekend, including the Monday game. I think that was like a .985 fielding percentage. Very interesting. All right. So, guys, it's been a brilliant edition of the Baumbastic Podcast. Appreciate everybody for tuning in, and we shall see if Arkansas is able to get these bats going this weekend. But we're going to have more Baumbastic coverage for you going into the weekend. I'm going to have Cameron join me for Thursday's episode. We're going to kind of predict how this Xavier series is going to work out, who our top picks are to break out, picks to click, whatever you want to call it. And we're going to make a little game out of it. So looking forward to that, and looking forward to being at Goat Lab Red tomorrow. We got two big live appearances. Tomorrow we'll be at Goat Lab Red for a pregame show of the basketball game. Gonna be doing that from 5 to 6. Basketball team plays at 6. And then on Friday we will be at Alumni Hall at noon for our usual Inside Arkansas live show. So be on the lookout for that. Come see us if you can. If not, just tap into what we got going on. Make sure you're subscribed to the YouTube channel, and have a great day, everybody. It's been another brilliant edition of the best podcast on the planet for anything, but especially Arkansas Razorback baseball. Have a great day.